Before we start, I'm here, Tanya Marta Thomas. I'm in charge of research at Climate Change Observatory. I'll be your moderator if you're not familiar with climate change. This is an association, international organization, founded in 2015 in order to federate non-state actors, all the various actors from the civil society, those identified by the UNFCCC, and we also federate various events, European or international events. And we also have publications of our observatory, and we share best practices on climate action through our portal, which is online on our website, where you could find our agenda, our library, our cartography and mapping of our actions in order to pursue the multi-actors work beside the events which we organize. From April to September for 2024, we also offer a space for discussion dedicated to climate action in Africa. This is in partnership with favour. Now, each eMag then also gives way to a publication of a magazine, which you can consult on our website. You can find more information on our program, and you can also consult the link which is here in the chat. Now, for this particular edition, we will be talking about Africa at the crossroad of renewable energy, facing major challenges such as the universal access to energy and the impact of climate change. Despite the limited access to energy in many of the African countries, it is possible to aim at a universal access to energy and to energy services which could be reliable and affordable by 2030, according to in compliance with the SDG number 7. Now, what role can non-state actors play in the face of climate changes and the challenges of renewable energy? We will be talking about this in our session. We will have Mélène and Victor Béranger, who will present the notes of the observatory's lens on the funding of renewable energy. Then we will have a press review with Habib Tizi, who is a journalist at AFRIV. And then we will have a panel discussion with our various speakers for today. And the last 15 minutes will be dedicated to any questions and answers and public occasion to speak. Until then, do not hesitate to send any questions via the chat box. And don't hesitate to introduce yourself, say who you are, where you're coming from, and rename yourself with the name of your organization and your name. So thank you again, everyone, for your presence here. And thank you to our speakers and to our interpreter. So without further ado, I leave the floor to Mélène and to Victor for the observatory's lens. Thank you, Tanya. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this eMag. I'm Mélène Assé-Wassana, in charge of climate action at Climate Change. As Tanya was saying so rightly, the topic for today is the funding of renewable energies in Africa, which is a key topic, especially in the African context, with a hot actuality, with power cuts in different parts of Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, in countries like Gabon, Togo, or Mali, with some power cuts, just to name but a few. These countries were faced with important power cuts, which affected both the daily lives of people and the various economic activities. When we look at this and we look at the power production on the continent, we realize there is an issue there, in that 40% of the production of renewable energy could be produced, but between the potential and the reality, there's a big gap. Because Africa could produce 40%, but one of the main key factors to release that potential, to move from an abstract idea to reality is an issue of funding, financing, and this is where things hurt, because according to the last decades, Africa was only able to attract 2% of the investments, global investment for renewable energy. And when you are aware of this, there are still 600 million people on the African continent who do not have access to electricity. And because of this, there are some commitments which are made by African countries, especially during the COP meetings and during the Nairobi summit in 23, and a goal was fixed to reach at least 300 gigawatts of capacity of energy, renewable energy productions in Africa by 2030. However, in order to reach that goal, we need an important investment estimated to $600 billion. Once again, what we can say about this is that in order to accelerate this transition, this energy transition, is a financial aspect, is a key driver. And that's a main issue that we have. But in the meantime, beside those goals and objectives, besides what could be potential, there is also the practice. There are stakeholders, non-state stakeholders, who are carrying out initiatives in order to reduce the energy deficit. And our speakers today and the various panelists and Victor, who will have the floor in a moment, will also talk of what's going on in practice, to share about the successes, but also of the failure and the difficulties that people might come across in their various deployment attempts or missions to deploy renewable energy on the African continent. So I'm now giving the floor to Victor for this. Yeah, hi. I'm going to share my presentation. I'm Victor Béranger. I'm an analyst specialized for NR data, specialized in energy, renewable energy, and I'm here to share with you a number of data to fix this, to explain this goal of 300 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030 in Africa, and compared to the current situation, and what are the challenges to take to reach that goal. So what is the current situation? Firstly, we want to start from an assessment of what is the actual capacity currently in Africa. So total capacities in Africa have been multiplied by 2 between 2010 and 2022. In 2022, there's still a capacity mixed with fossil energy representing about 75% of the total of the energy, and renewable energy count for about 25% of the total capacities. So there's a big gap. Renewable energy, we're talking mainly about hydroelectric or water capacities, about 2/3 of the total, and the rest mainly solar energy and wind energy. These capacities, wind and solar capacity, have been multiplied by 10 since 2010. Now, how can this capacity for renewable energy can evolve by 2030? If we start from 2022 with 62 gigawatts of renewable capacity in Africa, so in order to reach the goal fixed in Nairobi of 300, so we need to reach 300. This goal of 300 gigawatts could be answering 3 different scenarios that NR Data has developed. The first scenario is an NR space of business as usual when we continue the current trends. And then the NR Blue scenario, which is another one, taking into account that the goals will come to reach their goals regarding the NDCs during the Paris Agreement and the national policies that have been put in place. And then we have an green scenario as well, which makes sense, which is consistent with the global warming of less than 2 degrees. So what's interesting here on this graph is that there is a huge effort, and the commitments that were made in Nairobi are rather ambitious, and it's asking the African countries to implement a number of measures that would be more ambitious. Now, among the limitations or barriers, what will be necessary between 2023 and 2030 in order to reach the goal fixed in Nairobi? This is way beyond and way above the normal efforts of the previous decade. So in order to reach that goal, Africa on overall will have to add 30 gigawatts of capacity per year until 2030 to reach the goal, whereas on average it was only 2.7 gigawatts for the last decade, 2010 to 2022. Now, the second difficulty in order to reach the Nairobi goal is also a matter of maturity of the projects. We have a service that lists all the existing plants and those which are under development in Africa, connected to the network. And we can see in these data that there is a small part of the project that have really reached the level of construction as planned, with licenses that were approved by the transmission companies, whereas the number of projects which did not go beyond simply an announcement is quite a majority. So more projects are not started. Another thing which I wanted to show here were the updated costs of energy, while taking into account for different types of plants, all the costs compared to the amount of produced energy per megawatt. So since 2022, what we see here with this data is that solar energy and wind energy start to be competitive compared to gas or fossil energy and coal energy. And by 2030 and 2050, these trends will speed up. So what we see here is that it is possible to reconcile both decarbonation of the electric system. So that's it for me. So we're going to write a note on this topic with Mélène, who will also explore the various trajectories of the countries. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Mélène, for this presentation that gives us a framework before we can start our panel discussion. Before we really enter the heart of our matter, we were supposed to have a press review. I don't know if Habib from Afrive, are you there? Were you able to connect? Habib Tizi, I can't see all the participants on my screen. Are you there? I don't think so. So we'll come back to him later on. Come back to the press review later on. If he manages to connect, and he will present a number of press articles that talked about the latest news regarding renewable energy. Without further ado, let's get into our panel discussion. We're going to have 4 speakers today. First one is Florent Gallois. He's a coordinator of the support project to the Convention of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa in Expertise France. And then we will continue with Gérard Chouabia. He's a chair of the Cameroon Association for Renewable Energy. And the third speaker for today would be Djadji Touré. He's the head of development in Africa at Avanto Conseil, and we will end the roundtable with Camille André Bataille. She's a general director and co-founder of ANCA. So let's start. I will give the floor first to Florent Gallois. Okay, you are the coordinator of the support project to the Convention of the Mayors at Expertise France. Thank you for being here with us today. Expertise France has been accompanying various communities and partners to help them reach the various opportunities of funding for renewable energy. Could you help us? Could you help and understand how this has been taking place? Thank you, Tanya. I think everyone can hear me. And you can see my screen. Yes, very well. So hi, everyone. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, everybody. I will introduce now I will present to you a number of results which we have had through the Convention of the Mayors. We're talking about the Convention of Mayors for Energy and Climate. So this is a network of 12,000 communities, so local authorities that are joined in a network that mobilize. These are signatories across the world on this initiative, which is supported by the EU in Africa, to support various projects, to support local communities and local authorities. We have more than 300 of those which are signatories in Africa, representing 137 million people impacted. And the idea is to exchange, to share best practices, to share experiences, to do advocacy for local authorities in Africa, and to work together with the various committees regarding access to funding of the projects, both for adaptation and resilience. Also access to sustainable energy and renewable energy. So what can the role be, what role can these community collectivities play? So often the main energy projects are carried out at national level, so we can see what the role of the private sector could be as well. But territorial local collectivities also can play a role, and we worked on 3 axes. The first one is about planning action. First of all, we want to collect a number of data, understand what are the challenges on the territories. This is what you can see to the left. This is a map of Togo and PV energy. The idea here is to build together with the municipality collectivities a database, scientific base, to get a clear idea of what would be the options in terms of energy. And then we have a whole aspect which is a participative and supporting the structuring of the project in order to gather all the stakeholders, to talk together of the priorities and the needs of the territory, and then to identify the various people who could be project bearers, then to support administrative and legal support, to also offer some how to suggest how to access funding solutions, which is not always available to private stakeholders. And then the collectivities, municipalities that we worked with also wanted to show an example, therefore to impose the transformation, both on their legacy, also for their fleet of vehicles, for their public buildings. So this is what you are seeing to the right. This is placing PV panels in Togo on the town hall in the city. This was a project of a small scale, but still a project that enable this municipality to become an example and show by example. And then lastly, our role is also to raise awareness and to disseminate information. Another project that I want to highlight today is one in Kenya, in Kisumu, a biogas project in the west of Kenya, close to the Victoria Lake, which is almost the size of a region, representing about 1 million people. Kisumu wanted to elaborate this project to understand what would be the challenges in this particular territory. And then together we were able to work on the drafting of this project, grouping all these scientific elements, and another of other projects following a consultation with the population. About 40 projects total, which have a political support from the municipality of Kisumu. So this climate plan means, okay, we have here that 77% of the population, the Kisumu, depend on biomass as an energy for cooking, but only 0.05% of those use biogas. We were also able to get data on the waste produced in terms of solid waste and used waters, and to identify a number of stakeholders. Here you have the logo of Flexi Biogas, which is a local company offering solutions connected to biogas. Here we see various, we talk about access to clean cooking, which is something that was quite strong in that particular territory of Kisumu. As you can see to the top right of this slide, it shows the monthly cost that has been given to buying biomass for cooking in the hospitals and in the schools or in the public buildings managed by the collectivity. To have a clear picture of what are the challenges, this was very important. And the Convention of Mayors wanting to support their partners, it was important for that reason to identify these data, to be able to speak in a way that the funders could understand and work with them in parallel. Thanks to the funding of the EU, through the Convention of the Mayors, we were able to build a number of places in schools and community centers. In that way, we were able to show the relevancy of the solutions that were offered and to show their reliability from an economic point of view, because it was tested for about a year before the project could be scaled up. So that was the first and important step that was necessary in order to gain the trust of the various partners. Next, we had a discussion with various partners. We worked with the City Global Fund, specialized in access to financing for local authorities. Part of their work was to do a mapping of all the opportunities of funding. Here you have a table that presents all the various external opportunities with a classification depending on the opportunity, of the capacity and the facility of access to the finances and the type of support as well. Are there things which are not quite expensive or more important infrastructures, which of course are harder to reach to? Now the mapping there was to understand and identify the opportunities and to understand which one were realistic. And then we also supported the structuring rather of the project, to put together some files which are rather complex, relying on the data collected in order to place some applications, to place these files for application. Now we have a project which has been selected by the European Investment Bank to hopefully get funding or financing of 13 or 14 million euros through the mechanism of the investment bank, and also some subsidies for about 300,000 euros through the GAP fund. It's a bit complex, but through the GAP fund to be able to access these finances. It's important to understand these different elements. This is quite important to get these types of fundings. So there's that one which is ongoing. And there is a study which will help to give dimension to the project, which potentially could reach 620,000 people, and also to get access to 16,000 rather of those people to reach or to get access to clean cooking, to biogas for cooking. So this is just an illustration of all of these projects and what is the convention of the mayors, starting from a diagnostic of the territory, from collecting data, and to also have a participative approach, and then to support and accompany all these projects in order to reach or to access the fundings and then implement the project. Thank you, Tanya, for your. I hope I wasn't too long. No, that was perfect. Thank you, Florent, for this presentation. Therefore, we can see what role can the local authorities play and what is the process to identify the various opportunities and how to speak the language of funders. Now, I'd like to give the floor to Gérard Nchabia, President or Chair of the Cameroon Association for Renewable Energies. From your point of view, as a chair of this association working for renewable energy, what roles can play non-state actors in the development of renewable energy in the country? Thank you, Tanya. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Yes, we do. I'm Mr. Gérald Touabia, the president of the Association in Cameroon for Renewable Energy. Recently, I was elected the chair of the African Association and covering 14 countries. So I will now speak about Cameroon for renewable energy. I haven't had time to prepare a slide presentation. First of all, I will remind you what we mean by non-state actors. First of all, a definition. What is a non-state actor? There is no official definition, as you know, or consensus around this. Non-state actors are people who are independent to the state. They can be organization, profitable or non-profitable organization, to support a particular interest or an action with four main groups of actors: associations, NGOs, private sector, including economic partners and unions, then the sector of research. That's important to make the distinction between the various non-state actors. Now, federations, unions, NGOs, scientific organizations, citizens, and funders. it's important to understand what are the projects and what is the framework necessary to attract funding. Yet, still there is much to do, yet the challenge is still there because the challenge of funding is slowing down the responses to climate change and the importance of including local communities, populations. When we want to get some funding for renewable energy without including local populations, in that case, it means that the local communities, the local authorities are key factors in order, indeed, many action plans and other initiatives are developed at local level without taking into account the national commitments that often the local stakeholders are not aware of in order to develop strategies, visions, and common plans at local level. Meaning that if there is no direct link between the national government, national authorities, and the local actors, it becomes very complicated. And this would be a break, an obstacle to access to funding. Furthermore, local authorities and municipalities are often in charge or responsible for the local or for the things which are the results of climate change, urbanism, transport, water management. Local authorities can also contribute to assessing the consequences and the risks for the infrastructures, the risks deployed by these, or the efforts can help also to prevent this. So resources should be allocated where is needed. There's a link between the national government, again, and the local municipalities and authorities. There are many obstacles. These are elements which can also slow down the development. Non-state actors are facing multi-obstacles that makes it hard to access the funding and all the necessary resources. So the institutional barriers have many consequences. However, usually this leads to a poor integration of the populations. This is what I wanted to share with you, Tanya. This is a typical case for Cameroon. The main obstacle to funding and to access to renewable energy. There's no real regulations, no real national law to manage this, which is also another obstacle to accessing funding. That's it for me. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Gérard.
Thank you, Gérard. Indeed, we see the importance of having and then to understand what are the challenges. So our third speaker now, to whom we are going to give the floor in a moment, is Djadji Touré, who is the Director for Development, the Head for Development in Africa since 2011 at Avento Conseil, developing plants in Africa and in France. Djadji, you've been working for some years now for the development of renewable energy in several countries of West Africa. What challenges have you come across regarding access to funding for these projects? What have you implemented in order to face these challenges? Could you share a few examples with us? Thank you, Tanya. I'm going to share my presentation with you now. Can you see my presentation? Yes. It's not full screen yet, but we can see. Yeah, great. I think I have 8 minutes, so I'm going to put my clock. Yes, because we need to have a discussion afterwards. First of all, thank you for this invitation. So I'm Jadje Touré, in charge of development in Africa at Avento Conseil. First of all, to introduce what is Avento. We are a family company of engineering. We produce electricity, renewable energy as electricity. We work both in France and abroad for developing renewable energy. We are present across the value chain from the development phase all the way to the operating phase, including building and financing. Here you have 3 key dates. Valorem, founded in 1944 by Jean-Yves Grandidier, about 500 people today, based in Bègle, in the Bordeaux suburbs. 2011, we founded Avento Conseil, still the same person, after developing Valorem in 1994, developed Avento to host this new company as a major shareholder. 2016, the company got a new dimension. It became capitalized in order to be able to work at completing all the various services offered by Valorem. So be it in France or in Africa now, they work together, especially for PV panels, roofs, with the same business model which we have in France. Now, where do we work? Where do we intervene? You can see here on this map. In France, mainly in the southern western part of France. So southwest of France mainly. And in Africa, we are present in those countries, Western Africa and Northern Africa. Or we also do some prospects where you can see here on the map, what you can see here on the map. Taking us to our topic of the day, which is a funding of renewable energy in Africa, or funding energy transition in Africa, which is a large subject. So in Africa today, the speakers before me already mentioned this. Today, we consider that 600 million of Africans live without electricity today, about 40% of the African population altogether. Having said this, we can see here to the right, this is a study from the World Bank of countries struggling to get access to electricity, apart than 4 countries, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt. Only these 4 countries have a regular access, 100% access to electricity. All the other countries in Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, have real difficulties, and we see a great disparity from Ghana with 85% of access to electricity to a place like South Sudan with only 5% of access to electricity, going through Burkina Faso with only 19%. And despite that, the paradox is that what we're seeing that Africa is only attracting 3% of investment in the sector of energy for renewable energy and 3% for energy in general. There are reasons to that. Also, there's a request for electricity which keeps on growing. According to a report of AIE in 2023, by 2030, the request for electricity will increase by 60% in Africa. So there's a lot to do still. Now, talking about obstacles and barriers to the development of renewable energy in Africa, there are multiple. We can just give a few. There is a framework which is not adapted, has to be said. There are issues of public stakeholders with various risks of solvency, risk of solvency, various causes, multiple reasons. But if we look simply at the regulatory framework, what we can say today regarding the regulatory framework is that renewable energies, people who develop these projects need a lot of support. These are long-term investments. These are stakeholders who need a regulatory framework that can take into account all their concerns. In Africa today, when it comes to the regulatory framework, there are countries where maybe there are no planning at all, no plans at all, or where the frameworks are not enabling the renewable energy as part of the energy mix. For example, if we just focus on one particular country, such as the Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, this is the first economy of the region of ECOWAS. Sorry, I had some small issue here. I don't know if you can see my screen still. Yes, we do. So, okay, fine. Excuse me for a moment. Sorry about this. Now, if we look here, a place like the Ivory Coast, with the legal framework, we would say, okay, this is great. There is a legal framework in the country for renewable energy with some goals for integrating renewable energy. But there is no real framework, legal frameworks as such. No obligations to reach these goals. Now, if we look in terms of strategy and actions in order to reach those goals, here you see there is no real action there to implement. No actions are really implemented to make sure that these goals are reached. If we have another focus on the risk of offtake, I was talking earlier on about the risk of off-takers in renewable energy. You don't have. There are only just two models. Mainly, you develop a project that is in order to secure the investment through a contract for buying power, electricity, with some risk of off-takers. And in other countries in Africa, off-takers are in a situation where there is a risk to not be paid, which means that many developers want to have some guarantees from the states, but states do not issue these guarantees because the World Bank forbid them to do so. So this slide really shows clearly a number of countries which are in deficit today. The Ivory Coast, which hardly reaches the balance because of the off-takers, and that makes things very complicated. Another obstacle that we can see, what we have, what we call the cost of capital. The cost of capital is higher than in developed economies, or even China. In the solar sector, for example, so with a rate of 14%, which is only 5% in developed countries. This is what we call the WACC, between 9 and 14%, which is important to mention because this all depends on the conditions of funding and the duration of the funding. So conditions here, which are very expensive, means that the LCO, that is a global cost, or the cost of electricity, is higher. Despite this, we see that still solar energy remains the cheapest energy. If we look here at projects which were achieved in a country like Senegal, this is taken from the annual report, and here you can see clearly that regarding the variable costs of power plants, we went from 95 euros in 2021 to 128 euros in 2022. During that time, if you look at the last two plants which were developed thanks to scaling solar with the World Bank and the FMI, you can see that these centrals had tariffs going from 38 to 40 euros. Now, if we want to look at the answers to accelerate and ways of solutions, again, we will talk about the legal framework. We need to have more visibility, give more visibility to private actors. These are the two models that I have presented. Either when developers have PPAs, long-term PPAs, to enable them to raise some funding in order to finance these projects, with some risk of off-takers, of course. Therefore, states need to put things in place in order to secure all these developers and these projects to be able to fund them. The other model is a market. In Africa, there is no real market of electricity. In Western Africa, there is no market for electricity. And then the feed-in tariff is a kind of mechanism that will help launch a renewable energy to offset renewable energy in a lot of countries. For example, in France, what launched renewable energy were the purchasing obligations up to a certain capacity, and then you have call to tenders. So there is therefore visibility to stakeholders. Every year, state allocates capacity, therefore developers are able to develop projects because the developing phase is a more risky one. and the one that is not financed. Therefore, a developer needs to have visibility in order to make sure that the project will reach their goal. But if you don't have visibility in the long run, you cannot invest money in order to develop such projects. Third point here, to make sure there is a balance, financial balance of the various public operators for electricity. It's very hard to have sovereign guarantees in many African countries at the moment, which means that we need to find other types of mechanism, other an international scheme in order to bring a guarantee, in order to secure the payment of electricity. It doesn't mean that people won't pay, but a bank will not finance if they are not sure that the PPA is bankable. I think I will stop for now. I think I've got over time already. Another important point is to develop the market of capitals at local level. There is a risk, but if it was at local level, it could have been simpler to price these risks. Thank you for your attention. Sorry about going overboard over time. Okay, thank you for this very comprehensive presentation. And to conclude our roundtable, I want to give the floor to Camille. André Bataille is the General Director and co-founder of ANCA in the sector of renewable energy and dedicated studies. You are active in several countries in Africa, Madagascar, Ethiopia, Somalia, and RDC. How do you facilitate access to funding for deployment of renewable energy in these countries? And can you give us a few practical examples? Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's good to go last because I had time then to listen to all the other presenters. And it was very interesting to listen to all my other colleagues. Many things were said, or I will try not to repeat myself. I have just a few slides to present to you to put things back into context. The role of our company, ANCA. And I'd like to share our experience in terms of funding. And then I hope there will be some discussions afterwards. You have the floor now. Tanya, if you can pass the slide, thank you. So I'm ANCA, the director. I'm Camille, the director of ANCA. Next slide, thank you. I'm CEO and founder. Very quickly, this is a company with a strong African footprint, started in Madagascar 8 years ago. And we have a particular vision. As you were saying, we have different schemes, financial schemes, for energy projects, mainly solar energy, with a holistic vision and ecosystemic around our various activities. I'll come back to that afterwards. We consider energy as a means and not just as an end to itself. In order to support beneficiaries and users in a smart way and an efficient way, and also to create added value. We have developed innovative models and quite unusual or unique models. Besides our work as a company, as a private sector, we're very much invested on the international scene as part of associations in different sectors, mainly renewable energy and electrification of rural areas, with 250 members in 50 countries on 3 continents, including Africa, Asia, and Latin America, to federate various stakeholders from the private sector, but financial stakeholders to make progress. I just mentioned also the fact that we have a lot of women, 75% of women on the executive committee and 40% overall in the company. So that's part of the SDGs, but also of the global vision, which we should have for the continent, giving opportunities to women to operate in the energy sector. So I don't know how our audience, what is our audience made up? I don't know if this is not the topic for the day, but it'd be good to know who are the people listening to us, if we have as many men or women. In terms of activities and businesses, we have one first axis, which is solar, access to solar energy or renewable energy, mainly through infrastructures, solar infrastructures with mini grids. I think many of you have heard of this. This is part of the solutions which are offered to increase a level of access to electricity on the African continent, and privileged solution in order to be more efficient and to have opportunities for development across the African continent. This is an example of a grid of a plant in the south of Madagascar. On the next slide, we can see that it's not just about solar panels, but there are also infrastructures which come as an addition of productions. This is the first thing, which is halfway between public and private sectors. We are a delegation of public service. This is the case in Madagascar. We started our activity, but it's something that can apply in all of the countries in Africa, to use national tools and national companies which are able to deliver electricity with a liberation of the market and opening up of the market with the introduction of private actors. Next slide. Second activities is the applications of energy applications, which takes things a bit further than just development and construction for the production of electricity. We support beneficiaries on some main axes. That's the next slide, especially for the development of agriculture through modernization and the increase of the yield of the crops through the use of electricity and different electrical machines or engines to do agricultural transformation. Food conservation. Another axis is cooking. We are specialized in electricity. We also intervene on issues of electricity in order to improve living conditions and to limit the environmental impact. And then the third photo is supporting various entrepreneurs in various sectors of activity, the informal sector in remote areas and rural areas, through electricity to further develop their activities and improve their living conditions. Next slide. Now we're looking at another trajectory, which is in complement to everything else, to bring solutions to solar energy for the private sector and non-state actors. Here we bring technical solutions, sometimes for access to energy and also for energy transition. We help users. Here you see on this photo some mines. We wanted to introduce solar energy to have cleaner energy and to do some savings on electricity. Here, just to show you a number of other examples, other areas of activities where we bring solutions for services, textile industries, hotels, restaurants, without distinction, without discrimination. What we can note here is that it can be in urban or rural areas. Everything that we have developed is made available to third parties through counsel and technical assistance. We also support various actors for implementing projects, to develop legal frameworks. It could be market studies in order to introduce new technologies in new markets. I will stop now. Now, regarding funding, quickly, much has been said already, especially regarding the various obstacles, especially the previous presentation just before me, which listed all the various obstacles in the African market, be it the legal framework, the solvency of public actors, the lack of involvement of some organisms, especially banks, the risk of the off-takers, how to improve funding, and the attractiveness that can be improved or reinforced to attract more capitals, especially in electrification projects. Often we have a combination of various financial tools. We spoke of capitals before, we spoke of debts. So all of these tools have to be combined together. This is what we call mixed finance, which is really the power of the energy sector to be able to rely on this mixity, but make things more complex. So we need to be able to mobilize state actors to get subsidies in order to reduce risks. Sector of electricity was subsidized. This is a public service, and renewable energy has to be supported. What we're seeing today in the African market is that there is a lack of financial incentives, with more support to other types of energy. Now, regarding the debts, and this has been mentioned before, there's a lack of involvement and a lack of offers of financial products which are adapted in order to support the development of renewable energy. There's a real issue of balance between currencies, leading to an imbalance. Now, regarding equity, we have observed weak involvement be it for the FIDs, the international funds and development funds, or private sector. There is too much aversion to risks and an issue of consideration of various profiles. We lack private investments through equities, which is yet the first lever. I will stop for now. Thank you.